like truly practice, the biggest thing you probably want to maybe practice is like our compression wraps for hand, wrist, forearm, that kind of stuff, which is the same procedure as any of the other compression wraps that we've done. Just tighter distally, loosen up as you go approximately. Okay, so we'll start with forearm sleeve. So forearm sleeve, we don't really have any true neoprene forearm sleeves. If you ever need to put something on somebody's forearm, it's just going to be that light compression stocking that you would put on anything else. So depending on where swelling or whatever it is, you can do the compression sleeve just in the forearm, or you can cut it to make sure it's onto the hand too. So you just measure it longer, put a little slit on it so the thumb is able to stick through. So you can put a compression wrap all the way from your knuckles to wrist, to forearm, to elbow, depending on wherever your swelling is and how far you want to try and push the swelling out of it. Okay? Kind of the same aspect with forearm, elbow, upper arm compression. And then we also have forearm wrist, forearm compression wrap, so it's all kind of the same thing. You can decide. It's like really, I'm sorry. I don't like that. Okay. So depending on, like I said, if you don't have the actual white compression net stocking, you can do the same method with a compression wrap, usually with our ACE wraps. So depending what size, so depending where your swelling is, where you're trying to get out of it, whether it's just hand, just wrist, just forearm, hand and wrist, and forearm, choose the right length and size of wrap that you want. So I did bring up some little, these are just 2-inch ACE wraps. So this is what I would use for like a hand and wrist type of thing. I've got a few of those. Obviously, these are more of a 3-inch wrap. So if you're going to do more hand up into forearm, obviously we do have our 6-inch wrap. But if you're going through the hand, obviously a 6-inch wrap is not going to fit through your hand. So making sure you're picking out the proper size of ACE wrap for whichever area you're trying to use their compression for. I got a couple of these. So if we have time to practice today, great. Otherwise, all of these are downstairs. Cool. Also, just kind of tip when you're doing hand and wrist, you'll want to do kind of like a figure 8 pattern. So just like when you tape your wrist, you get that figure 8, we have an X here. Same process, except you're probably going to go around the hand first and then around the wrist, a little bit tighter, once again loosening as you're finishing up on the upper arm. So. Forearm pad, a lot of the same concepts that we've done with pads elsewhere. So we have typically our donut type padding that we're going to put on there. Usually if somebody constantly gets hit on an area or they do have some large contusion and they don't want it to get hit, we're putting our forearm pads. If we're just walking around day to day, go ahead and use an ACE wrap. If we are actually playing, you may need to wrap it up with some type of stretchy tape. So pre-wrap first or with shear light, or go ahead and use PowerFlex, whatever it might be. Obviously this guy's a little big for me. It's just the first one I kind of found and grabbed out of our scrap drawer. Okay? So different types of foam padding that we all have in there. I did bring a couple of different types of sheets, foam padding for us to look at too. I think I brought up different types of padding for you guys to look at. So, okay. Hand and wrist compression wraps. We basically already talked about all of those. Just making sure, do your correct size or right size of ACE wrap for them. So we'll go ahead. So then forearm cast padding. So I did bring a couple casts that we'll talk about. So obviously here, I brought them down from football. So football is one of those sports that you can play with a cast on. It just needs to be covered. So obviously a hard shell cast, this can be used as a weapon. I can stick it in my hand. I can just fight through and smoke on whoever it might be. So obviously, so you might, okay, want me to? Okay, so any of this hard shell type casting stuff has to be protected in whatever sport that you're going on. Obviously, as you can see, this guy goes over top of the hand. Would be hot, would be heavy, would be hard. Anytime we have casting, so even if somebody breaks their wrist, The cast might go around their hands, but then you got these little fingers here that have no protection on them. So if you're in a super physical sport such as football, if you're a lineman, these fingers are at risk. So then we end up getting some extra hard shell like this, so that protects those little fingers. Okay, so otherwise you're at risk of breaking your fingers on top of your already broken wrist. So we put some type of other added protection on there, so I can sit here and I can try and block if I need to. I can still run. But then, I guess we have to cover this because this can still be used as a weapon. So then, if this isn't big and heavy enough in itself, then we take our foam padding, whatever it is, and basically wrap it up on top of this. Obviously, this is plenty hefty. It looks huge on me because it is huge for me. My hand is sliding and around everywhere in here. But we're taking those casting and whatever type of casting you have, you're just covering it up and making sure none of that hard shell is visible or able to use still as a weapon. Obviously, yes, I could still take this, even though it's wrapped up with foam, and still take it after somebody, but at least you don't have the hard shell on there. So depending what type of cast it is, after we get a chance, I'll go ahead and pull up my phone. I had a soccer player that broke her hand, but she was soccer, so she didn't need her hand. As long as she didn't toss it in, she wasn't a keeper. So we wrapped her up in foam and sent her out to play. It was heavy. Like I said, she still had to run with this giant cast and padding on her hand. So it was extra heavy, extra weight on her and kind of weighed her down a bit, but she was still able to play. As long as she had hard cast, covered up in foam, sent her off to play. So I'll see if I can pull up that picture on my phone so that way you guys can see it. Foaming, always check whatever sport it is. Every sport has their own regulations about how thick it has to be. So making sure you talk to your coaches, they pull out a rule book. Most coaches usually carry a rule book with them anyways. So double check that before you actually do just wrap them in foam and send them out. Everything still has to have a procedure on it and regulations. And I always suggest too that if you have this type of circumstance, if you have someone with a cast that's padded, talk to your officials before the game starts. So that way you're like, hey, this is going on. Is this okay? They usually kind of feel around and say good. Better to have them check it before the game starts rather than you're halfway through the game, all of a sudden tweet, oh, that's an illegal player. Sorry, they're gone, or some other infraction is going to get put against your team. So always make sure you have the official check it before the game, match, whatever ends up starting. So obviously some sports are easier to get away with this than others. We did have a volleyball player. God, what team was that? Was it Northern? Concordia. Mankato? Either way. So she was a right side hitter. It was her left hand, so it wasn't her hitting hand, but she had it casted and it was foam pad over top. So we actually had a conversation about how legal is that in volleyball, because obviously she'd still go up and block. So instead of being able to spread her hands out, she just had this big club on her hand. Was that legal? We had brought it up. We pulled out the rule book. We talked with the officials. Basically, she had no control over it. So is it helping her or is it hindering her? Yes, she has a big, massive club, but all of a sudden it hits the top and it could go shank off any which way. So she ended up being allowed. Like I said, it was soft, it was padded, so that she wouldn't come across the net and try and beat the other team with it. And like I said, it was her left hand, so she could still hit with her right, and then she rotated out, so she wasn't able to play the back roll to try and pass it at all. So there was at one point that I did see her actually set the ball, and it was quite impressive.
She did. She would serve, and she played back row at the end of the season.
She did? With the cast on? Mm-hmm. Well, I must have missed that. Okay. So, like I said, some sports, it's easier than others. Volleyball wouldn't typically be one that you would think we would be able to. But obviously, yes. But then you think like baseball, softball, one hand you got to throw, one hand you got to catch. Probably not going to work in those situations. But and like I said, for her position, it worked. She wasn't a setter, and it wasn't her dominant hand, so she was able to make it work. So. All right, moving on to wrist and thumb and finger splints. So I have a whole array of actual braces that we have. I'm trying to see what we actually have for thumbs. I think these are all thumbs. Yep. So your braces, obviously, depending what kind of injury you have, is it just a thumb injury, is it a thumb and wrist injury? What's the best way to be able to protect that area? I'm trying to see what we all have here. We don't have a true wrist brace on here, do we?
I don't think so.
Oh, so I'll put this in here. So we have just wrist braces and we have wrist braces with thumbs. And so obviously these guys are our thumb braces. Ooh, this is gonna be too small for me, maybe, okay. So it utilizes the wrist. The straps are just like super small or super short. So somebody had this, and you can tell, cut off the strips. So it's not gonna fit someone bigger that we need to be able to tighten it, okay. But anyway, so this one has like the separate thumb splint on it. So instead of taping them in a thumb spica, this holds them into a straight position. We have a couple different designs. This one's a little less invasive. This guy has a good wrist hyperflexion, hyperextension metal piece on there, I believe, and you can take it out too. So it's adjustable. So if you wanted a thumb and wrist with a larger wrist but not the hard padding, you could take the splint out. Otherwise, we have this guy that's just more of a neoprene type compression. Let's see if I can. So this gives absolutely no wrist protection besides maybe a little bit of compression on them. Okay. So and this one actually has a hard metal piece on the side too to prevent some of that abduction of our thumb. So depending on your injury, depending on the comfort level, depending on what your athlete's going to be doing, these typically cannot be played in type of thing. The only sports that maybe you could play them in, like I said, with soccer if they're running and if it's approved by the umpire official. I would never put my volleyball player out there, basketball player out there in a true brace like these. And I would use one of our taping methods so they would have a little bit more functionality with it, okay? Like if I could try and dribble a ball with this hard metal piece in here is going to prevent me from actually getting some good wrist motion, passing, dribbling, whatever it might be. Okay. And then we have just straight wrist braces, usually called like wrist cock-up splints. Most of the times you can find them in right or left ones. Obviously this is a righty. Let's see if I can even get them on. So these are for just our typical wrist sprains. We have there's a little compression sleeve in there. Sorry, my jacket's gonna get in the way. Okay. And once again, this has a nice little hard metal piece underneath too to prevent usually too much hyperflexion and extension. As with our tape, we can either do a hyperflexion tape job. Most times when you have a brace, you're only going to have the hard piece on your palmar side, and that's still going to help you get too much flexion and extension with it. You're not going to find too many or any braces that's going to have like a hard piece on your dorsal side with it, okay? Because even the brace and the straps itself helps to prevent you to go into that extension motion along with it. Okay. Like I said, this one is just a righty. And we have ones like this guy that's got the hole on both sides. So this can be used as a right or left. So if you're on a financial budget and you don't want to buy 6 rights and 6 lefts, you can buy 6 of these and they're universal and they can go for a righty or a lefty. So depending on what you want to buy or what you all want to have in stock for you. Okay. So next we'll get into all of the orthoplast. So anyone here worked with orthoplast yet before, seen it? Hopefully at least seen it or whatever. I didn't bring a straight sheet. So orthoplast comes in like big squares of white hard plastic. You cut off the size that you need, dip it into hot water. So typically we dip it into our hydroculator and it becomes moldable. Okay, so nice and flexible. Then you can cut it and mold it to whatever type of piece that you need to be, so it creates a brace for you. So a couple of them here. This will be obviously it doesn't fit because it's not molded to my hand, but we have it extra. So this would be a wrist splint or a wrist brace. Just like this guy would be for our wrist. And we would just take it and wrap it on with Ace Wrap, PowerFlex, whatever it might be. And then here we have a couple of thumb spicas, or thumb protections. So this guy is just nice little sleeve that gets placed on there. The added protection down here helps, helps from too much abduction so it doesn't come out. The metal blocks for me. Obviously it's not made for me. Otherwise, we have this guy, which is more of a true thumb spica. Once again, doesn't quite fit me, but it kind of bends around. So like when I showed you our alternate thumb spica tape where we just do around the tape and around the wrist. So this is if you still want to have good wrist motion with it, but protect any of that thumb movement. Makes sense? Same thing, since this is kind of loose, I would just take maybe some PowerFlex or something to wrap around here so that this guy is tight. Once again, it doesn't fit me, but we can make it to fit me. So even though this has already been molded to somebody, I could take this whole device, stick it in the, not with my hand on it, stick it in the hydroculator, make it a little bit more flimsy again, put it on me or whoever I would be fitting it for, and reshape and reform it. So that's the super nice thing about Orthoplast, is that it can be reshaped, reformed until it becomes almost too stringy, too worn apart. But you can reuse it quite a few times on a number of different athletes. Okay? So we have a couple of those, a couple of thumbs, a couple of wrists. Obviously, here's another one that we had made for a football player. I'm assuming this is more of a, I'm not quite sure if they use it more for a fracture in the fingers type of thing. So it's molded this way, and they probably allowed him to play with this. So obviously it gives protection to our wrist, so we don't have it. But since it comes up and covers up the fingers, I'm assuming it was made for somebody that probably had a finger injury or some type of fracture in the finger. This is, couldn't find a true boxer's fracture brace or molding, but this would be the closest thing we have to it. Okay, it covers all four of the fingers, whereas the true boxers would only just cover your fourth and fifth digit. Okay, but same thing, nice solid Orthoplast. So it was actually pretty molded. Can be remolded a little bit to fit someone. Obviously, this is quite a big thumb hole for me that it can be adjusted. Okay, so we got a couple of those. Oops. Sitting here, and obviously they have the slit in them, so they can be taken on and off for games. We got one here that's probably for wrist and thumb, but it's just one side, but it's got the straps to cover it. And we got this guy that basically covers the entire hand. So same thing, yes. So same thing if you got somebody that's got a partial injury, where it is a thumb, hand, wrist, and you'd want to protect the rest of the digits so they're not just kind of floating and flying about, you're going to basically encase them in something like this, which we did grab a couple of those. So here's another one. I don't even know if I can get, holy cow. So this one's taped together. Obviously you can see it was sawed off, but they saved it. So the athlete, even though he was healed, so for day-to-day activities, he could probably take his cast off and be active, but to protect it during the games, they would put it in here. And this one is super weird because like the thumb is like up. So don't ask me exactly what injury this was because it was super weird. Yeah. So and actually I don't know. So yeah, this one's actually really weird. So you can look at it and play with it. Here's one that was just for a thumb. I don't even know if I could get this hand on here. So same thing, extra super long, super big for my hand, but extra thumb protection if we didn't want to put a true thumb spica on them. But I said that's protecting his thumb. The only thing, like I said, you worry about is if these extra digits are going to get affected or hurt or something. Depends on their position and what they're all going to be doing with them. If those guys are going to get caught in the crosshairs. Okay. One other material I have here, I'm not even 100% sure what this is called. Is this called like an exoskeleton? So this is on the form of a Orthoplast, but it's much more expensive. So once again, I'm pretty sure they come in large sheets. You open the package and it's moldable, so you have to like mold it to the person right away. So it's like a sealed package. Open it up. place it on the athlete, and then hold it around until it gets hardened and forms. And you get these nice little strings on there. Just turn the knob, and that's what makes it tighter and attach. So just kind of, and then another type of castine material, orthoplast material, depending on the orthopedic clinic that they get sent to, if they feel like this is proper or hard enough of a material for them to be sent home in, whether it's a sprain or a break even. This might even be more of a transitional period, so they are in a cast for 4 to 6 weeks or even 4 weeks, and like, oh, yep, you're looking really good, but I'm still want to keep you protected. We're going to transition you something to like this, where it can be taken on and off to either perform therapy or, you know, start motion, those kind of things. I think they can play in this, but once again, this one's got an extra little bit of padding on it. So even in football, they could potentially play in something like this. Once again, check your rules and check the officials unless any kind of extra foam or anything has to be added to it. Okay, a little more expensive than just true casting material. Obviously, way more expensive than just buying a couple sheets of orthoplast. So I'm guaranteeing we got this from someone that went into an orthopedic clinic somewhere, and this is what they sent them home. So this wasn't one of our pieces. Yeah. Here's another thumb split. Sorry, I'm kind of jumping around a little bit. So this one looks a little bit off, so it opens up. It's got a little extra foam padding on the sides. So it might be a little bit more comfortable for your athlete to walk around in. Once again, still a little big for me. And then this guy wraps around. Okay, so once again, just thumb, doesn't add any extra wrist protection at all. Okay. So I got through most of those, and we'll just touch on finger splints quickly here. And then we'll still have plenty of time if you guys want to practice and look around. Okay, so we have a number of different finger splints. One of the more common ones are called stack splints. So they come in different sizes. These are more for our DIP injuries. Okay, so our fingers just stack in there. So I need a bigger size. This one's probably even too big. So you just find the size that matches for your athlete. So more of a DIP injury, so that way they can keep that DIP joint straight up for any type of, usually like trigger finger or extensor, flexor, tendon ruptures to try and keep them in a straight position. We also have different types of metal with foam backing on them too. So this guy's obviously long, and you would cut it down to size. So if I had a first finger injury, I would cut it down to size. If I just want to protect my true digit, or if I want to check my full or protect my full metatarsal, then I would clip it off, wrap it on with some type of flexi wrap, ace wrap, whatever it is to help hold it on. So obviously these are not functional splints. These would be what they would wear throughout the day. This is kind of the same concept. Actually, we go like this. So finding your correct distance or length that you want to be able to splint them in. If you want something a little shorter, like I said, we don't have too many short ones left. They kind of disappear. And we just have like little short guys too, if you want to protect just that DIP joint. A little bit longer. I'm sorry, I don't have any medium sizes in here, but, and then just depending where we want to split. If we wanted to, even these guys could get, they are moldable or flexible type 2. So if you wanted to move them a little bit or hold them in a certain position, so if they needed to be held in a slightly flexed position, you could also splint them in that position also. Cool. And the last type of finger splint is, where did I put that? Just one of those that goes over top. Here we go. Okay. Another one, this guy can open and close, and this will just go over top, a little bit more common, so that way you can keep them in nip and then just wrap around it to go ahead and keep them in there, for especially for fractures and those kind of things where you don't want to get any kind of bending or motion to them. So those are finger splints. Any questions? Went through fairly quick. I know that. We'll give you a chance to kind of look through everything, play with everything, try a couple things on. those kind of ideas. And then if you want to practice any of your ace wrapping, especially through the hand and wrist and up into the forearm, those are the main things to practice. And we can obviously answer questions as we start going through them. Cool?